Hello, I'm Ramya. The intention of this video clip is to highlight the importance of language, literacy, and numeracy in training adults, because the reason is these adults can be working at present, or the intention is to get into the workplace. So therefore, day-to-day learning is part of our life. So for me, considering the experiences and exposure I have gained over many years, I felt there is a strong link between language, literacy, and numeracy in today's workplace, which is multicultural in nature. So I'm going to start with this presentation in a minute. So please let me share my screen with you so that you would be able to see it clearly. So this is called LLN footprint. It's having a longer effect, not just for a short period. So LLN stands for language, literacy, and numeracy. So the contents going to cover in this case is the definition and how it applies to online study, not the face-to-face in particular. So this is focused as it is a digital side of learning. So, and how to establish boundaries and how to diagnose LLN needs or skills and what keys are used to diagnose. So then I will be looking at this input processes outputs considering as a conclusion. It's not here. Focusing on a specific aim. I have some 3 wheels put in there. So the next one is I'm going to look at Australian core skills framework and how this is fitting into the Australian settings. Then I will be looking at the general skills and the critical skills, the learning and teaching process, referring to a flow diagram, and then my model that I found. I created this model called peeling the layers, and then treatment plan execution. So finally, summary, questions, and any other matters. So the footprint for online study or lifelong learning, the way how I define this, its footprint is a mark or some impression left by a foot or a shoe on a ground or a surface. So the different colored areas are the substitution. The footprint was substituted by LLN footprint. A mark and impression, which is substituted by LLN mark or LLN impression, right? It could be left by the lecturer or the facilitator or the institution. You can change it. Then on the ground or on the surface, that is where the place. So the place is substituted by on students online learning. It could be online learning. You can twist it into a blended learning model easily. So as this was said, language, literacy, and numeracy. The language is mainly focusing on reading and understanding. But the language area is listen, speak, read, write. The 4 skills are involved. But referring to online learning, it's important to understand text-based information. And then the information coming out of any voice or audio recordings, video clips, that is, video clips have sometimes diagrams. Then graphical information could be in the form of pictures, conveying a message. So therefore, under the language, the graphical information comes under the Bloom's taxonomy, which is the 6-level architecture, starting from the bottom, remembering, and then the next level, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. But for the first step, we are looking at understanding and remembering. That is the contribution of the language connected to Bloom's taxonomic stages. Right? So I'm coming back to this model again. So that is mainly the first two layers. So that goes back to language area. So we have done with language in brief, and the next one is we are looking into literacy. So when it comes to literacy, it's not just more than a technical skill of reading, writing. It is the ability to read information and to write appropriately. Appropriately can be defined by different people in different ways. But we need to set boundaries here. So what is this appropriateness? It covers explain, debate, retrieve, entertain, create kind of areas, right? So if I go back to Bloom's taxonomy, I find now the connection with literacy is it covers applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating those 4 areas. So that means that out of the 6 areas, the top 4 is going towards the literacy, which is a step ahead from language. Now, in this model, this is a world accepted norm. The top 3 levels are called higher order thinking skills, and the lower 3 are called lower order thinking skills. So this was adapted from this Bloom's taxonomy from an expert page. It was acknowledged. So we are done with literacy, and the last one is the numeracy. The numeracy is not just calculating numbers using a calculator. At least at this day and age, it is necessary to use Excel as a tool to calculate for the purpose of plotting graphs from the information gathered. Plotting graphs necessary, then interpreting graphs. So a couple of examples are the cost-benefit analysis covers a number of areas, the project management, the change management, even in strategic administration and management. In day-to-day life, cost-benefit analysis is a common issue. Then accounting and finance-related subjects, as well as Excel-related studies. So to diagnose LLN needs, I'll be using 2 tables. First one is the general language literacy and numeracy needs, and the next one is the critical ones. So going back to the general ones, so do that using a special key. The key is having these elements: reading, writing. L1 is used for language because there are 3 L words here. Language is one. I've got listening, another area. Then I have the literacy. Literacy is remembering and understanding. So because of there are 3 L's, L1 is language, L2 and S for listening, speaking. Then LI for literacy, LI 1 and 2, considering 2 areas referring to Bloom's taxonomy. So then LI 3 to 6 is, yes, literacy, but the higher order thinking skills. Then finally, the numeracy. So now thereafter, the importance is getting back to the LLN model, the stages. The stages of the LLN model is necessary. So to do that, I'm going to get into table 1 and table 2, right? So there are 3 major wheels involved in this process. That is, the general LLN skills I considered. Then the next one is the critical LLN skills. And the third one is students submitting assignments, going for marking and grading. And then there are a number of assessments for a given training package. So this is starting from assessment 1, and then 2, 3 is the same. Finally, a student is recording the final grade, passing grade. So this 3-wheel approach comes from the clock. So where I'm using the seconds and the minute and the hourly wheels, but note that the minutes wheel is rotating anti-clockwise. So, and it is crucial here, right, to make sure that the wheels are rotating correctly. The critical learning, language literacy and numeracy skills are to be met. If not, these 3 wheels would not rotate. and your hourly, the clock would not move. And that's not what we want. We want it to move. So the next one is going back to the table 1, which I am using to show the how I grouped my students into different areas of the learning pathway, right? This is based on the resources that a lecturer or a facilitator is supposed to use. What kind of resources? So generally, it starts with the first information we consider as in the form of a welcome email and a welcome video. So how far can the students read and understand this information given, and can they follow those instructions? So based on that, this is how they were categorized. And then can the students comprehend the material given? Can they compare and contrast? Right? Can they contribute to forum threads? Can they find out learning material from the learning management system by following the instructions given? So areas I have shown, use the key to group them. The first one, the very first one, the point of contact, in that is ability to read, literacy 1, literacy 2. Then to process further, so the participation in chat rooms, then sending a quick email or quick mail, that's another one. And then would the student require repetitive instructions for a given task even after giving one-on-one session? So can a student set a PowerPoint presentation, a general thing? This is a preliminary skill. So can the student upload assessments to the learning management system by following instructions? Do the students have ability to express diagrams and do little calculations and to participate in virtual classes? So these are major areas. They're general again, the surface information. Now, when the surface information, in my case, I consider students as groups and find out whether they have this using a scale, yes and no. If it is no, then there are steps to be taken to bridge the gap. So bridge the gap is mainly it could be over the phone, it could be Skype or Zoom or the virtual class with IQ. So online help can be given. Sometimes demonstrations. So a number of methods are used to fill the gap. So, and then once the gap is filled, the next level, we are going to move into the general learning skills. So with the general learning skills, general learning skills are connecting, bridging with critical learning needs or critical learning skills are used here. So the critical learning skills will be little more than the general, but some of the stages areas are bridging. So you may find the same number appears again. So when it comes to critical, it is more than the general. Report writing and presentation is necessary. Sometimes group discussions to how to initiate. This is facilitating collaboration or social learning theories. Then analyzing reading. There is a document called smart reading. A lot of adults have no idea of what smart reading is. It's not just reading in your head and writing notes. It's more than that. So it is breaking into reading stages and what a learner would do and what kind of reading, whether the learner is using short notes, whether making inferences with other website information, whether using mind maps, whether recalling memory and trying to create something. So that kind of, that's called reading, self-assessment tool. And that is identifying the weak, what they do not do, and then what they would willing to add to their reading program. So the purpose of this is whether the student is capable of eliminating the weaknesses identified, right? Then another critical area considered is using other websites, finding study buddies, forming groups for them to discuss ideas or discuss concepts. Then one of the most important thing is the academic world is referencing to tell where they got the information, because we are in the information age. So we refer to American Psychological Association's 6th edition of referencing. So that is also important part. So in these cases, these are the critical skills in relation to different learning packages, but at the end, there are steps to bridge the gap between what the learner knows and where they're supposed to be. So these are mostly done through drill and practice exercises, then checklist we use to make sure that the students have completed what is expected, then pinpointing weaknesses and requesting follow-up advice. Advices could be via forum, again via Skype, the WisIQ, then the Zoom. These are all tools that we use. So, and once we identify the general learning skills and the critical learning skills, the next is moving to, this is what the three-wheel diagram was initially. So in that diagram, you saw this information earlier. So then the next one is what I have used is, I used this Australian core skills framework because it has to be connected to make sure that the students have reached the expected Australian standards. Then I found to connect these pieces together, I need some kind of a flow diagram, because Australian core skills recognition framework, it's one thing. Then I have identified my general learning skills. And then I have another table, the critical learning skills. Now, I found all of them should be connected to one little piece to tell the story. So this is the Australian core skills framework, which is beautiful in the sense that it has given, there are 4 columns here. The support, this is giving what kind of support given to individual students. Then the context, the text complexity and task complexity. So I labeled these as column A, B, C, D, because then there are rows, the rows are for 5 levels of performance, so that I could label each rectangle using a specific term. So the first one is A1, then the second row A2, A3, A4, A5, then the next one B1, B2, B3, B4, then the next one C1 to C5, and the next D1 to D5. So, but this is just to show that this is Australian skills framework. This is available, anyone could use it, but I have adapted that to suit with this situation. So that is the next one. So to do that, so in this case, what I have done here is getting the first one, and with my table, it says this can be connected to table 1, that is the general LLN skills, or this can be connected to flow diagram. So this is just to show how I have adapted Australian core skills framework with the settings, with the grading system. Grading system has 4 boundaries. The students not meeting expectations, not yet competent, we call. Then students are meeting expectations, that is competent, but competent has again further 2 levels. Those who do really well, we call it performance with distinction, and those who do above average, we call performance with merit. So now I need to go back to my flow diagram, because the flow diagrams gives you an idea of all the processes involved. Now in this case, there's the symbols used are the normal flow diagram symbols. So the symbols, to go to the symbols, it's better I highlight those symbols first. So that makes sense. So arrow is the direction, circle is to connect a flow diagram on different pages. Then the diamond is represented by a the decision box is represented by a diamond. Then start stop process will be a sausage. A rectangle will indicate a process, and the parallelogram will show you the other sources that I've been using. So going back to the flow diagram, you may find it, I have specified this table 1. This is connecting. Now, in this flow diagram, as I said, I have the starting point and then the decisions to make. When the decision is made, there are two sides, obviously, yes and no. So the first one is the point of contact number 1. Point of contact is the welcome email as well as the welcome video. Can the learner understand what was there, and can the learner follow the instructions? So that's the very first step. So those who yes, then they get into the next level. So then, right, the data, the parallelogram indicates which data is connected here. That is, Australian Core Skills Framework has 3A, 3B, 3C. This is going for independent learners who can follow. If they cannot follow, then Australian Core Skills Framework says with the expert mentor, they can get there. That's what I put it under process here, referring to a student progress advisor to help, or referring to technical coordinator or individual assistance on any defects identified. So then that's again looping. Once they bridge the gap, they're coming back to the mainstream and following number 1. So they become yes. And once the first step is done, the next step is ability to start engaging with the material and engaging with the lecturer or the facilitator. So to do that, they have to send forum notice, forum posts, chat rooms, emails. So that's the next step related to learning material. So then if that cannot be done, again identify 2 stages, yes and no. So then referring to certain areas, students like to say, difficult to understand. So therefore going back to the smart reading document. Can the students follow most of the steps in the smart reading? Where is the weakness? What remedy can be suggested? So this is again yes and no from the decision box, 2 decisions. Those who yes, they fit into the next one. Those who cannot follow, they loop it and they need support to bridge the gap. So bridging gap is working with the expert mentor, and then that covers Australian Core Skills Frameworks level 1A and 2A. Right? So then they take a little U-turn, but they get into mainstream with time. So the next stage is finding, going through the learning material given on learning management system. This is in the form of PDF documents, workbook, exercises for them to enhance their learning for each and every topic. So if that cannot be done, then the next stage is those who cannot do, in that case, bridging the gap, once again, contacting them either over the phone or sending SMSs to create, to find out a space to create a session, a virtual session, either via virtual classroom or Skype or Zoom, so that the process can be demonstrated. Once the process is demonstrated, the student becomes more confident. So then they get back to the same, the major learning pathway, that is the main route, right? No U-turns. But those who have made U-turns are also succeeding. So there is no difference between those who follow directly or those who make U-turns. At the end of the day, everyone needs to succeed. Now, once it is getting to 3rd stage, this is going the 3rd stage. From 3rd, reach the 4th one. Here I have used the connector because it is in 2 pages. So the next one is instructions once sent to participate in virtual classes, right? Can they follow those instructions in virtual classes? And then can they apply that information gained in problem solving? The problem solving are the assessment tasks that they are doing. There are two stages again, yes and no. For those who cannot do, again, they need assistance. So working with the expert mentor, and that's what the process, the rectangle is showing, right? So that is, this is the whole flow diagram has cycles within cycles. So the learning process is an iterative process in the sense it's going back and forward. So once we have done that stage, virtual classes, the students should be able to follow those problem solving. That means assessment task, what they have to do to prove that they have mastered the basic skills. So I have again put by the side parallelograms. This is how external data is connected to the decision boxes, and that's the purpose. So once they can complete those activity and the assessments, they need to submit. Assessment submission, again, they are given instructions on how to submit. Once they submit, it is going for a grading. So the grading is based on a checklist. Checklist says whether the student has followed all of these items as expected. If the student hasn't met those expectations, then they will be given another chance. That's attempt 2. So with this attempt 2, given clear instructions on what to be done. So at that stage, if the after assessment marking, if it's not yet competent, then say no, and then going through the defects and giving time 2 weeks to resubmit this assessment. So that's called the attempt 2. So once attempt 2, those who cannot complete in first attempt, they go through attempt 2, but there is no difference between that. The final grade is the final grade. Only difference is if assessment is resubmitted, it will never go to performance grading. That means a student cannot get performance with merit or distinction. It ends up with competent only. So then what happens is that's for the first assessment. So the second, third, fourth subsequent assessments are entering into this flow diagram from this point third. So that's what I have written here. It's looping from number 3. So once all assessments are completed, then the final grade will automatically appear on the learning management system. So if I go back to the items I have indicated here, so what happens is we have Australian core skills framework, we have the general language literacy and numeracy needs or skills. There's another one called critical LLN needs, and there was a flow diagram showing the step-by-step process of online learning. So these 4 major items now have certain further elements are there, but it is not clearly highlighted. So there are some areas, there are special connections to be made. So to do that, I have created another diagram, which is here, which I call it peeling the layers. So you need to wait to peel the layers, because layers should be peeled from the outside to inside and not from in to out, right? So it doesn't happen because you can't insert your finger into a big onion bulb to get the center out, okay? So let's see what the stages are, what the layers of this whole online footprint. If you look at the first one, it's the general LLN skills that I have indicated in table 1, and also I referred that to Bloom's taxonomy, the first 2 levels, right? That's the very first one at the center. So the next outer court is the education theoretical underpinnings comes here for the reason that there are behavioral scientists, the constructivist theorists, and then social learning theorists. All what they said was how a learner performs tasks, what has to be done is there. So therefore, we cannot forget that, because how the adults learn is important. So there are different adults are having different learning styles. So it's not just educational theory, and there are other ingredients have to be added to get the big picture. So the third stage I find is learning styles, that is work model. That is some of learners are more visual. So some of them are auditory, they need to hear. Some of them are reader writers, they keep notes, read and write both. And some of them are kinesthetic, they wanted to do, they are learning a process, something by doing. So therefore, it's not just the digital world we are learning here, it's more than that. How do you identify what kind of learner you have, and what kind of material you have, and what kind of technology you use, and also what the education, the theorists say. Most of these are scientists, they have done experiments to prove their case. And what have they said? So the whole mixture should be considered to ensure that the mentoring is productive. So the mentor, the Australian core skills framework says working with a mentor, and that's where these are connecting, the theoretical underpinning as well as the learning styles. Then the fourth level is the diagnosed Australian core skills framework, which I have shown. Which level the student is, it's a combination of ACSF as well as the flow diagram, right? But you can look at ACSF without the flow diagram, and you can look it with the flow diagram. Then the fifth layer is the critical. The reason that it was taken to fifth level is, once you have the general learning skills, these are coming in number 2, 3, 4. So to build critical LLN skills, it is necessary to look at the education theoretical underpinning as well as learning styles of the learner. But by referring to Australian core skills framework, and then we get the idea, right, this is the critical learning needs, language literacy and numeracy skills. Again, it's referring to the Bloom's taxonomies level 3 to 6. So you can see how these are interconnected. The next level I see is my flow diagram, which I had made 7 stages. It comes in because the flow diagram, again, it shows what is the pathway and where the learner is and how the learner climb up the ladder. Everyone wants to climb up the ladder. So it's the same applies here. Then performance grading. On what grounds the assessment was graded as competent or not yet competent, or performance with merit or distinction. So that has to be identified. That's performance grading. Finally, we put the final passing grade on learning management system, or there's another administrative system, right? So these are recording results. So now what I'm going to do is, once I put my layers together, I found this is 1 to 8. It's not that straightforward, right? Because from educational theoretical underpinning, it connects to general language literacy and numeracy skills, right? So you need to go back. So there's a cycle here. What do they say? Would it work? Right? So there is a connection. Similarly, learning styles should be matched with the education theoretical understanding. There's a bridge, there's a connection. You need to find out what this connection is, how it works. Would I need to motivate this student, this learner more than the other one? Would I need some kind of group settings? Would the learner be benefited from a group setting? And what's the learning style? Is it a mixture or is it one? It's little more than the VARK model, because VARK model says visual, auditory, reader writers, and kinesthetics. So some students have all combinations. In my case, it's all. Some of them have. I have a really bright student who was completely text-based instruction, text-based instructions needed to follow the learning pathway, nothing else. So you cannot say, okay, those ones who use text, they are better than the other or worse than the other. There is no grouping here. It's mainly saying the learning styles, different learning styles. So if the learning styles are met, every student can do better. So my case, I'm opposite for the reason that I like all models, but I need constant changing, not the same style. But here, if you look at that, some of them can be text-based and auditory both. Some of them can be text-based, auditory, and reader-writer. Or some of them can be both. So you find different combinations of learners here. So that's a challenge. So this is why I'm going to connect with that and see different learning styles, how to deal with these people. And then it is going backward. These are again cycles connecting. Let's get into the next level. So I see from fourth level, diagnosed AC Australian core skills framework has areas that connects to all the 3 levels that I looked at before. So that's why I put some green arrows here to show how this connection works. Then I have critical learning skills, absolutely critical. Language literacy and numeracy skills are based on the general language literacy and learning skills. However, as they progressed through and when they climb up the ladder to reach the level 5, still there are connections to the previous 4 levels. Then my flow diagram, it connects all the levels below. So in other words, a top level is connected to either one or a number of bottom levels. Now for number 7, I do not have space to put that there, so I put some dotted lines and left it there. So that's the peeling layers, and now you can start peeling from outside for the final grade, and you can make the connection. Then only you feel, once you get the onion, imagine it is on your palm, and you use one finger, and using one finger, you are going to peel these layers by looking at this diagram. This is a fantastic model that can be used at the institutional level, and then it can get into a national level. But get into national level, we need certain other skills like project management plan, execution, user training, change management, right? So all those areas are required. As I have done that, I know that it can be used at national level. So the final goal is how far the learner has gone, starting from the general language literacy and numeracy skills. Everyone wanted to learn. So it is fair to give that chance to each and everyone to progress and to advance in their careers. So therefore, this model can be manipulated and used in any settings using the people who have the skills to do so. Now, finally, I found there's another connection here. All the training packages are focusing on employability skills. So these employability skills come from outermost layers, but without forgetting, the outermost layers are nourished by the innermost layers, and that cannot be left out. So this model fits into the workplace requirements, and that's the whole purpose of education. So the learner should be able to master skills at workplace. So during this journey, we find sometimes some symptoms are there. Sometimes the adult learners not willing to accept the fact that they have these defects, but it's necessary to identify defects and then cater. So the symptoms are sometimes assessment may not be submitted. Sometimes they do not go through the stages of the levels, the flow diagrams, and all of a sudden assessment is coming in. And for an example is a project management. So project management is a planned process where you need to plan for resources, for human, the financial. You need to have a cost benefit analysis. You have a budget, and you need to have work breakdown structure. You need to have a time plan. Right? You need to conduct a meeting, write the minutes of agenda. You have to follow. A meeting should be conducted based on an agenda, and the minutes should be recorded. And with project, if the project cannot be completed within the expected time, then at that stage, what is the backup plan? So how do they assess the risk? On what scale risk should be assessed? So those are the major elements of that. So without all of these elements, if getting an essay about, okay, here a wedding, example, wedding, okay, this is the wedding, this is the budget, this hotel it will be done, and here the card, and finally writing a sentence saying the couple is going to get married to live here happily ever after. And that kind of essay, a generalized essay, is good for English language, but not for project management. So the project management subjects clearly says these are the skills that the learner need to be mastered to get a satisfactory grade in that training package. That's one example. So this is how these are symptoms. So, and sometimes we find those calculations for Excel-based calculations are done using manual calculator, or perhaps another example is accounting and finance papers, budgets, how budgets and cash flow, then operational expenses, and then profit and loss account. They all are done in the manual method, but then the issue is when you get the tabulated data, and when you want to plot graphs, you can't do that on a manual calculator. You have to use Excel. So from Excel, what we expect is comparing data between two different periods and plotting graphs to tell the reader what comes out of the graphs. So that is interpretation of graphs. So that cannot be done. So these are a couple of examples. So the duplication, when certain work, when we see that the assessment sets and submit should automatically go through Turnitin.com to identify the duplicated percentage. When the duplicated percentage is higher, that clearly shows that the student did not have the ability to process information in head and to apply for the given situation in assignments. Okay. So the other item is the checklist. Checklist elements in assignments are given to students in the form of a checklist. So when the checklist does not have all boxes ticked, so that shows as another symptom. Then sometimes without reading, it's easy to write an email and say, could you please tell me where can I find this information and how could I find information? That shows that either did not read or was not a priority. So can be a number of reasons. So this one was addressed earlier using manual calculator, and then the list can go on, right? So the next is the treatment plan. Treatment plan is need to structure the journey. There's the connections I made between table 1 and 2 with the flow diagram by referring to Australian Core Skills Framework. Great. Then using the available tools and the talent. That is, this is where the education technology comes in. What tool should be used at what time with what concept, and by referring to learning style. So the picture is really broad because I can address this picture in this sense for the reason that I have handled these education technology applications, and not just handles, I have the qualification to do so. So, and not only that, I have done postgraduate diploma in education, which also gave me the theoretical underpinnings of the learning pathway. Then the next one is my ability to deal with technology, which comes from my computing background. So therefore, this can also be, I'm using that knowledge to tackle with learners having different technologies. At the end of the day, the technology that they use is not as same as that I use, but I need to find common grounds, and that is important. And finally, looking the whole picture from a business perspective, because they are our customer. So therefore, it's necessary to listen to your customer and to, in this case, listening customer meaning, not that the grade is given or passing, the student is giving required resources and structuring pathway to come to the required standard. They need to come to the required standard. So there are some boundaries in this area. So therefore, this treatment plan, you have to see a number of times, need to think again and change the strategy. And sometimes it is necessary to discuss with a colleague or expert advice is also necessary. This is what's happening with continued professional development. We go through every week to identify what else can be done. So it's a lifelong learning process for us as well. So once the treatment is planned, the treatment need to be executed. So execution is another area. How do we do that? In what way? Do I need a video clip to do that? Oh, sometimes I give certain learners number of instructions, text-based, web-based, referring to audio clips, or I record a video clip and I uploaded it to learning management system and then ask them to view that recording. So the idea is, at least if you have, for each and every topic, so the number of topics are different because the training packages, it can be project management, it can be networking or sustainability, or it could be change, accounting, finance. So it covers a whole number of areas. So therefore, for all those subjects, for different concepts, it's necessary to be creative and to find out which resources can I use with this student to make a difference. So praise is treatment execution. Praise is necessary. Dealing with adults, it's one of the main ingredients. So, and also it is told by the behavioral scientists like Bruner and Skinner. Now get into the summary. If I look at the summary, there is a whole process. We have inputs, we have processes, and we have output. So the input starting from the point of contact, that's where input. In addition to that, the rest of the inputs are the resources we use, and then the mentoring process that also becomes an input. Then the processes, mainly processes are diagnosis of the general language literacy and numeracy, followed by the critical language literacy and numeracy. And it is the student active involvement or engagement is the key. Then finally, get into the passing grade. When all the training packages are passed, then the student will be comfortably obtaining a diploma certificate, and the next level is advanced diploma certificate, and the next level is a degree certificate, and then the next is the master's, and they can go up to a PhD. It doesn't matter where they start. If the journey is structured and if they wanted to achieve, they need to be supported. So there is no time limit as such. So it's up to the learner. The time limit meaning the time of life. Some learners start from 25, 30, 45, 50, and so on. So therefore, everyone deserves a chance to learn. Now the questions. So we're going back to interpretation. Should the interpretation be changed? Let's look at the interpretation. Yeah, here it is. So this interpretation, this is how it was initially defined and application of that. If you think that it has to be changed, please send an email to my personal email address, which is ramya@maxnet.co.nz, so that I can see what additions I could make to develop this model. So that's one way of looking at it. Now, this is where I was. So it could be a facilitator, lecturer on students learning. Facilitator, idea of facilitation is, it's not just lecturing method at this point. It's not you're talking and getting away with it. It's more than that. Lecturing would not work with that. It is identifying that what is required to make that difference. How can the learner understand this concept and apply in alternative situations? That's what facilitation is. So it's worthwhile to look at language literacy, numeracy analysis and reports. So these are the broad picture. The whole idea is how it could be used the organization wide and also the national settings. So there are sometimes some learners need specialist support, and there could be a lot of questions if this was implemented at project level. So that's all I wanted to say that. So I end up with this note here. This is one of the most important areas that I have discovered. So that's all about the language literacy and numeracy footprint. So it's more of a kind of a digital footprint. Yes, it is digital, but it has number of other elements in it. So therefore, one little thing need to be noted is the email address provided. It should be, I could put it here. I could write it here, which is for all communications. It's better using this my personal email, which is ramya@maxnet.co.nz. All lowercase, it's not uppercase. Just keep a note here. That's where the all further critics and this I expect some constructive critics. Okay, so that's all. I hope this is a very useful model, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you.